Hello you guys, this is Ben, Vertigo here, and I'm doing another video, as you can see. After doing my PMDG, NGX, and Aerosoft Airbus tutorial series, I got a comment from someone. He very politely asked, could you do a video on how to interpret charts? That's something that I struggle with, and I said sure. It's something have a fairly good understanding of, and I'd be willing to share what knowledge I have. So obviously this video is going to cover charts, and it will cover, it's only going to be one part, but I'm going to cover obviously how to find charts, because that's the most important part. Or not the most important part, that's a very important part. If you can't find the chart, you can't decipher it. And then I'll cover kind of the various types of charts, approach charts, arrival charts, departure charts, and then the different variations within that. And then finally how to decipher them. So without further ado, we can get started. I guess another thing I should say is, another two things I should say. Thing one would be, this is not going to cover how to insert the information into an MCDU or an FMS or some kind of flight management computer. You can look at my tutorial series. That might help you a bit. There's plenty of other videos out there. This is strictly going to cover how to understand these charts and make sense of the information that is presented on them. Secondly, at the end of the day, or not at the end of the day, once you get accustomed to this and start to understand what the information on here is saying, you will it kind of snowballs in the sense that the more you learn, the easier it is to learn, future issues. So if you come into this feeling intimidated or totally overwhelmed when you look at a chart, that's perfectly normal. I was very much that way. But once you begin to pick up on what things are telling you, and you start to gain that knowledge, it becomes much easier to understand things as you progress. So let's get started. So we need to find the charts, of course. Now, if you're flying in the U.S., it's very easy. Go to skyvector.com/airports, and I'll put a link in here for Skyvector. And if you click, this is the standard page. So let me go to it. If my internet will work. Not sure if my internet's working. Alright, here we go. So if you go to the home page, you'll see a massive sectional, basically. And if you come to airports, this is where you'll want to click airports at the top page. And you can enter the identifier ICAO for any particular airfield. So that's just as an example, take Los Angeles. And it'll give you a bunch of information on the airport. The phone's ringing here. Sorry about that. Let me wait for that to stop. Okay, so the phone stopped ringing, finally. They'll show you a bunch of information, the coordinates, the elevation, give you frequency information. They'll give you information on the runways. They have overhead views, various, VFR charts, IFR charts, so forth, and so on. What you're looking for, if you're looking for charts, you come down here, keep scrolling all the way through this information, and at the bottom here of the page, you'll find charts. So you have weather minimums, star charts, which are standard terminal arrivals, instrument approach charts for your RNAVs, for your ILSs, and if they have a published visual or visual approaches, they'll put that in. Departure charts, which are SIDS, that's probably how you know them. It's how you get out of an airport. Skyvector has charts for pretty much every airport out there in the United States, and if there's a published routing, published chart, they're going to have it. So Skyvector is a great source. Now if you're in Europe, changes things a little bit. You'll want to do is go to vatsim.net/charts, and again, I can put in the link here at some point, or in the video description rather. I can put in the link so you guys can grab this, and you'll see they have charts for various regions. If you click Europe, let's assume you're flying in Europe, that's a fairly popular place. And then they'll have a list of countries. Let's say you wanted to fly out of an airport in Germany, so you click Germany. And it would bring you to VATSIM Germany's page here, with a big list of charts for all the airfields in Germany. You can, select the airport that you're flying out of, but for the sake of this tutorial, let's select Hamburg here. And we'll click Hamburg, And you'll see again more information, the current MEDAR, runway information, charts. This is what you're looking for down here. And you'll have a bunch of charts. You'll have a complete chart package. You'll have a zip package if you wanted to get the whole thing. Airport info, ground chart. And then you have, here's your arrival charts, which covered the stars for all runways. And then you have transition charts for that particular star onto a runway. You have approach charts for ILS approaches, NDB approaches, localizer approaches, and RNAV approaches. And then you have departure charts, which are the SIDs. If you just click here on the right-hand side, downloads, it will open a PDF of that particular chart. So this is the standard instrument departure off runway 5. And if you zoom in, you'll see they have your initial climb. This is the top altitude on your departure. You don't want to go above this. They'll have designators for each of the routings, and these are unique to the runways. They'll have information here like remain on tower frequency until passing 2,000 feet, just kind of basic stuff that you need to know. And then if you come down here, they'll actually have a visual depiction of the routing for each of the routes, depending on the runway that you are departing. Something that's unique about Europe that isn't the case in the US, these designators, they have a different SID, a different designator for each particular runway. So if you're departing, as you can see, this is runway 5, and each designator is unique. Let's say you were departing, let me go back a page real quick. That was for runway 5. Let us pull open the SID chart for runway 15 and compare. You can see how the names slightly change. So, you have the Ekarin 7 Charlie, and then here you have the Ekarin 8 Delta. Pretty much the same departure. It's going to take you to the same fix. It's going to give you the same routing out of Hamburg. However, because they're on different runways, the 7 Charlie's on runway 5 and the 8 Delta's on runway 15, they changed the name. That's not the case in the United States. You can have a SID that has the exact same name, and it will be applicable for multiple runways, if not all runways. So Europe's a little unique in that each runway has a unique SID, and each SID has a unique runway, if that makes any sense. So if you're departing runway 5 and you're on a particular departure, say the Ekarin here, you're only going to get the Ekarin 7 Charlie if you're departing runway 5, nothing else. Whereas in the United States, you could have, say, the Holts 9 departure out of Los Angeles, and you could take that off any of the runways, any of the westbound runways at Los Angeles, 24 right, 24 left, 25 right, 25 left. So they're a little unique in the way that they do things there. If we come back again, I mentioned they have approach charts, which are just basic approach charts. I can give you a quick peek at one. And I can pull open the star here as well, the arrival chart. So you can see it's an approach. They have the ILS frequency right here, the identifier India Hotel Hotel Whiskey, the inbound course listed, the frequency for the ILS. They have minimums down here if you come down here and look at minimums. And I'm going to go over this thoroughly with the Skyvector charts. I'm just giving you a brief look at Europe. They have, if it's a Cat 1, Cat 2 approach, they have minimums listed there, and then they have category of aircraft. And this just depends on the ability of your aircraft to climb, essentially. If you can, basically the amount of feet that you are able to climb in X number of miles is going to have a big impact on the category of your aircraft, because necessarily if you need to go missed on a missed approach and you're unable to climb at a particular rate, you're going to need to go missed earlier rather than later, which is why you get up to heavier aircraft here, category C and D. You can see the minimums are higher and higher, meaning if you don't have the runway in sight at a higher altitude, as relative to a category A or B aircraft, you need to go missed. They even have your DME off the Ulster VOR. So you can see ALF is the Ulster VOR. They have DME off the Ulster VOR. and then your altitude that you should be at if you're tracking the ILS. So lots of good information in these charts, and that is the way in which you find them for Europe through vatsim.net/charts. Obviously Skyvector if you're flying in the US, and it's a bit easier. Just real quick, we can look at the star here. You can see the star brings you into LB here, and then you'd expect, I'm assuming, vectors to final, although I haven't read the transition charts. At any rate, you can see you have the Bogmu 1 alpha if you're coming from Bogmu, the Risbo 2 alpha if you're coming from Risbo, and they all bring you in here to Lima Bravo Echo, which is the LB VOR right there. Raurup 1 alpha, Nalgo 1 alpha, so on and so forth. And then again, I haven't looked at the transition charts, but I'm assuming you'd get vectored in or given a direct to a waypoint for a particular approach fix. At any rate, that is how you find charts if you're flying in Europe or anywhere else for that matter. Massive list. It'll take you to the VATSIM website. They'll have charts available for you. As for flying in the US, which is where we will look at most of our charts here, they have everything consolidated for each airport at Skyvector, of course. So let's take a look at a number of charts. Let us first look at a departure chart, and we'll look at two here. We'll look at the Ventura 5, and we'll look at the Holts 9. So the difference between these charts, the Ventura 5 is a non-RNAV, meaning you don't need area navigation. Certain aircraft are RNAV equipped, meaning they're capable of flying RNAV routings. If you have an RNAV aircraft, you do not have to fly an RNAV route. It simply means you can. If you do not have an RNAV aircraft, you have to fly a non-RNAV routing. You cannot fly an RNAV. Only certain aircraft are qualified to do that. So the Ventura 5 is not an RNAV. If you look here at the Holts 9, let me zoom in a little bit, flip that. You can see it is. You can see RNAV listed right here. So this is an RNAV departure. So looking at the Ventura, you can see, let's look at the visual representation first and foremost. So here's the airport over here, Los Angeles VOR. Vortac is tucked in right here, and they actually have depictions of the runways. And then you have a particular heading to fly. You can see there's restricted airspace right here, and then various VORs, the Ventura VOR, the San Marcos VOR, and then these aren't VORs. Dinty and Pseudo are not VORs, they're simply fixes out in space. They actually have a description down here at the bottom, which will make all this at the top make a lot more sense. So if you're taking off on runway 6 left, 6 right, 7 left, or 7 right, they're all consolidated, meaning this is the departure procedure for 6 left, 6 right, 7 left, 7 right. You're going to climb on a heading of 070 for vectors to the Ventura VOR. So you're departing off these runways, you're going to climb on a heading of 070, you're going to maintain that heading, fly that heading, and you're then going to get vectors from ATC over here to the Ventura VOR, so they'll send you on a turn. I'm not sure if they'd send you right or left. You very rarely depart Los Angeles to the east. It's almost unheard of. But they would then vector you in some way to get over here to Ventura. Sorry, I was looking down here at the 2-4s. So vectors to the Ventura VOR. Then, via your assigned transition or assigned route, expect further clearance to filed flight level 3 minutes after departure. So what does that mean? If you have a particular transition, you can see there's only, well, you have the San Marcos transition, of course, and then the Dinty transition, 2 transitions. So let's say you got vectors, you flew a heading of 070, got vectors to Ventura, and you were on the San Marcos transition. Once you reach Ventura, you would proceed on a 289 heading here to the San Marcos VOR, and then you'd proceed with your routing from there. If you were on the Dinty transition, once you got your vectors and were crossing over Ventura, you'd fly a 272 heading to Pseudo, and you'd then fly a 233 heading to Dinty, and then proceed with your tracking or your routing at that point. As far as the filed flight level 3 minutes after departure, that simply means, ATC will give you a call. They'll say, let's take any random call sign, American 370, climb. They'd give you, you're going to get an initial altitude when you depart, say 5,000 feet. They'd climb you up to 13,000, and then eventually you'd get up to a center controller who would give you climb all the way up to your final flight level, whatever it is that you filed for. That's more important if you're on VATSIM, so don't worry about that too much. As far as takeoff runways, 24 left and right, 25 left and right, again, this particular procedure right here that's listed is applicable for all 4 of these runways, the 24 left and right and 25 left and right. So, you're going to climb via heading, let's read it, 250 for vectors to the Ventura VOR, cross the Santa Monica 154 radial at or below 3,000, then, via your assigned transition or route, expect further clearance. So what's that saying? So if you're departing off these runways, you're going to fly a 250 heading, and you can see here's the Santa Monica VOR that they referenced. There's the 154 radial, so it comes in real tight just off the runways. They want you to cross over that radial there at or below 3,000 feet. And you can actually see they have 3,000 indicated here. Something we can touch on now. 3,000 and it's below this bar. Occasionally when you're looking at charts, almost always when you're looking at charts, you're going to see these bars depicted. When when you see a number between 2 bars, that means you need to be right at that altitude. When you see a number below a bar, that means you need to be below that bar, at or below 3,000 feet. And the opposite of that, naturally, is if that number is above the bar, you need to be at or above that altitude. So wherever the number is relative to the bar, that's where you need to be. If the number's below the bar, you need to be at or below that altitude. If the number's above the bar, you need to be at or above that altitude. If the number is between 2 bars, you need to be right on that altitude. So what this is saying is the Santa Monica VOR, the 154 radial, crosses out here, just off the departure, off the 25s and 24s. You need to cross this radial at or below 3,000 feet. Then continue to fly a 250 heading, and ATC will give you a vector over here to the Ventura VOR, as they said, and then you'll proceed on your particular transition. If it's to San Marcos, you'll proceed to San Marcos, and then with your routing. If it's to Dinty, you'll proceed to Pseudo, Dinty, and then with your routing. So, this is not an RNAV departure. This is basically you fly a heading, and then you receive vectors. And the departure is slightly different depending on what runway you depart, but it's applicable for all the runways. The departure itself, the Ventura 5, can be used with all runways. Simply the way in which you fly it will change depending on the runway in which you're departing. Let's look at the Holts. So the Holts 9er. This is an RNAV departure, and obviously it's a bit different. So, as you can see on the depiction here, they give you a 249 heading. You see a particular altitude, you're proceeding direct to all these fixes. Let's read the chart. That's the most important thing. So let's say we're departing off runway 25 right. Climb on heading 249 to 620 feet, then direct to cross the Docker fix at or below, to cross Docker at or below 3,000, then on a 218 track to cross Wheeler at or below 5,000, then via the depicted route to Holts. Thence, via the thermal transition, expect further clearance, flight altitude 3 minutes after departure. Okay, so climb on a 249 heading to 620 feet, then direct to cross Docker at or below 3,000, 218 to cross Wheeler at or below 5,000, then on the depicted route. So what the hell is that saying? This is 25 right here. So, 249 heading, you can see at 620 feet, you're then going to proceed direct, and it's basically on the same heading, to Docker. And you're going to cross Docker here at or below 3,000 feet. As you can see, that 3,000 is under the bar. Once you're at Docker, you're going to continue on a 218 heading, so a slight left turn, to Wheeler. And again, 5,000 under the bar, you're going to cross Wheeler at or below 5,000. And then, it says, after Wheeler, then via the depicted route to Holts. So you'll see a routing here. So from Wheeler, it's 216 to Schaeff. Then it's 153 to PV, then to Holts, then to Thermal. If you're departing off the 24s, it's slightly different, and you can read this. Let's say runway 24 left. Climb heading 249 to 620 feet, that's the same. Then direct to cross Delray at or below 3,000, so a different fix. then via 254 track to cross any at or below 5,000, different fix, then via the depicted route to Holts. So let's take a look at 24 left. 249 heading at 620 feet, you're direct to Delray here, at or below 3,000 feet. Again, the 3,000 is under the bar. You then make a slight right turn on a 254 heading to any, where again 5,000 under the bar, you're crossing any at or below 5,000, and then you simply follow the routing as depicted on the chart, to Nank, to Dokag, to PV, to Holts, to Thermal. So, what's the difference between this chart and the Ventura? Well, this is basically a cohesive route. The Ventura is a particular heading, and then you're getting vectors. This is a cohesive routing without any kind of discontinuity. You don't need to receive a vector. It's all laid out for you. So what this means is it's more efficient. It requires a bit less work by the controller. However, you need to have an RNAV capable aircraft in order to fly this routing. So that's the difference between that, and that is a departure chart. With that done, let us take a look at a arrival chart. We can look at the SADE-6 because that's a good example. So here's the SADE-6. Let me zoom in so you guys can see this, and I'll do the same here. So let's read the arrival description. If you were flying from San Francisco to Los Angeles, you'd almost certainly have the SADE arrival, the SADE-6 arrival, and you'd have the Avenal transition. So as you can see, this particular arrival has a bunch of transitions. They have them all listed here. The Avenal transition, the Derb transition, the Dinty transition, the Elke transition, the Fillmore transition, the Palmdale transition, the San Marcos transition, and the Ventura transition. So, depending on which direction you are approaching from, or arriving from, I should say, you might have a different transition. So if you're arriving from the north, you're probably going to have the Avenal transition. If you're arriving from the west, you're probably going to have either the Dinty transition or the San Marcos transition, because if we look here, here's the San Marcos transition, here's Dinty out here, here's Avenal up here. So based on the direction in which you are arriving from, your transition might differ. And you might ask, well, how do I pick a particular transition? It would be best to look at a flight plan, and you can find flight plans on FlightAware. Alternatively, what you could use is some kind of flight planning software like PFPX, which will auto-generate you a route. But you'd pick your transition based on the direction from which you are arriving. So let's say you were arriving from the east, it would make most sense to use the Palmdale transition. At any rate, let's take a look at the Avenal, because that's the one I singled out. From over the Avenal Vortac, via the Avenal 129 radial and the Fillmore 310 radial to Fillmore Vortac, then via the Fillmore 148 radial to Sadie, thence, from over the Sadie intersection, via the Santa Monica 261 radial to Santa Monica VOR, then via the Santa Monica 068 radial to the Santa Monica 9 DME for runways 24 and 25. From Santa Monica 9 DME, expect vectors to final approach course for Los Angeles International Airport. So that's a mouthful, and that's a lot going on at once. It makes the most sense here to look at the chart. So Avenal, this would be your entry fix, this would be your transition. You're going to come from over Avenal on a 129 track to Derb on a 129 track to Reyes, then on a 130 track to Fillmore Vortac. Once you're over Fillmore, you're going to make a slight right turn on a 148 heading to the Simon intersection, and they actually give you vertical navigation planning information. So if you read right here, turbojet vertical navigation planning information, expect clearance to cross Simon at 12,000, cross at 280 knots or as assigned by ATC. So at this particular intersection, they're saying you can expect to cross this at 12,000 feet, 280 knots. From Simon, you basically continue on the same heading to Sadie intersection, and again more information. Cross at 250 knots or as assigned by ATC. You then make a hard left turn to Based, turbojet vertical navigation planning information. Expect clearance to cross at 10,000 feet. More information on your altitude. And then you're direct to the Santa Monica VOR, and then they say you can expect radar vectors to final approach course into Los Angeles. So, And of course this will change based on where you're coming in from. If you're coming in from the Dinty transition out here, you'll track into the San Marcos VOR. You'll then make a right-hand turn and track down to Ventura here. From Ventura, you'll then track to Sadie, to Based, to Santa Monica. So your routing is going to depend on your transition, but it's all published here. While I'm thinking of it, I mentioned how the transition that you receive is going to depend on the direction in which you are arriving from. It's exactly the same with departures. The departure that you select, the departure procedure that you select, will be largely dependent upon the direction to which you are departing. So if you're departing Los Angeles to the east, or southeast, you'll take the Holts 9er. If you're departing Los Angeles to the north, you'll take you can take the Fix-It 2 or the Ventura 5. If you're departing to the west, you'll take the Perch 9er. Your departure procedure, your SID, will depend on the direction in which you are departing. So if again, if FlightAware is a great resource to find these routes. If you don't know which SID or star to pick, PFPX will auto-generate a route. When in doubt, pick a routing that seems to get you towards the direction in which you need to depart, into the direction in which your flight path, your flight plan takes you. Let us lastly look at some approach charts. So I'll pull open the ILS 25 left, and I'll pull open an RNAV Zulu for 25 left. So here's the ILS runway 25 left. Lots of information here. Localizer, DME. The identifier for the ILS is India Lima Alpha X-ray, ILAX. You then have an ILS frequency. The frequency for the ILS is 109.9. And then they give you a course. This is the heading of the runway, your approach course. 251. Sometimes you'll have an offset localizer. So actually, when I said this is the heading of the runway, that's not correct. This is the heading in which you're going to track on the localizer. Some approaches have an offset localizer, meaning you're not going to be lined up perfectly with the runway. You're going to have to, it's slightly offset, so you'll have to fly a slightly different course once you've taken out the autopilot. But this is the course in which you're going to track towards the runway. You then see the landing length. So 25 left is just over 11,000 feet. 25 right is about 100 feet longer. They have touchdown zone elevation. So the touchdown zone elevation for 25 left is 104 feet. For 25 right, it's 102 feet. And then they list the elevation of the airfield. They have missed approach procedures. So if you had to go around for some reason, this would be the procedure. You're going to climb to 800 feet, and then upon reaching 800 feet, you're going to make a climbing left-hand turn and continue your climb up to 2,000 feet and fly a heading of 190 and the Los Angeles Vortac 210 radial to the Catley intersection, where you will then hold. So if for some reason you had to go missed, this is the published missed approach procedure. As you can see here, a visual depiction of here's the airfield, here's the approach course, here's how far the localizer extends out, and here are various fixes and their distance from the airport. This is what you want to look at down here. There's some good information. Let me zoom in a bit. These are your altitude restrictions. So they have fixes off each particular, or they have fixes for various distances off the ILS or off the localizer. You can see Ladle, Lima, Honda, Gate, Fueler, Dymo, Tarek, Crane, Lovin, so on and so forth. And you have altitude restrictions. So when you're at Lovin, you need to be at or above. See, 10,000 is above the bar, so you need to be at or above 10,000 feet. Same for Crane, same for, Tarek is then 9,000, at or above 9,000, so on and so forth. So it's a steady glide path, and they'll give you altitudes for each of these various fixes that extend off the localizer, off the ILS, and they'll show you the distance between each. So 4.3 miles between Crane and Lovin, 3.5 between Tarek and Crane, 3.5 between Dymo and Tarek, so on and so forth. That's just good to know and good to have in the back of your mind when you're, if you're in a more sophisticated aircraft, these will auto-insert. If not, you can say, okay, add up the distances here, so 1.7 plus 3.8 plus 5, is however many miles, so at this many miles I need to be at or above this particular altitude. The other important thing down here are your minimums. So they have minimums listed here. If you're approaching on the ILS runway 25 left, your minimums are 304 feet. If you're on the ILS 25 left, right? If you're approaching on the localizer, doing a localizer approach runway 25 left, your minimums are 540 feet. If you get a side step from runway 25 left to runway 25 right, your approach minimums are 700 feet. What does this mean? Minimums basically indicate the altitude at which, on the barometric altimeter, I should say. This is not a radio altimeter. This is not above ground. This is your barometric altimeter, mean sea level. So, if you don't have the runway in sight at this particular altitude, so let's say you're approaching runway 25 left, and your minimums are 304 feet. If by 304 feet MSL you do not have the runway in sight, you cannot see the runway, you have to go missed. You cannot go below these. Of course, if you can see the runway, you're fine. Continue your approach. But if you can't see the runway at this altitude, you absolutely, positively have to go around if you want to follow the chart and do things realistically. It's unsafe to do otherwise, is basically the reason in which you have minimums. And my dogs are barking, so I'm going to wait for them to quiet, and then I will continue the video. Alright guys, sorry about that. Dogs were barking, so I needed to cut the video to avoid that interfering. So one other thing I wanted to mention here on the chart that I forgot to mention just a moment ago that's fairly important. If you see MSA LAX 25 nautical miles, this is the minimum safe altitude approaching Los Angeles from 25 miles from a 25-mile radius. What does that mean? That means if you're entirely unsure of what altitude to be at and you're not being controlled by ATC, who should keep you safe, these are the altitudes at which you should not go below. So if you're approaching between a heading of 120 and 240, don't go below 7,700. If you're approaching on a heading between 120 and 010, don't go below 4,400. And if you're approaching on a heading between 010 and 240, don't go below 2,700. It's just meant there to keep you safe. So when in doubt, don't go below those altitudes until you're cleared to do so by ATC. As for the RNAV approach, as I was saying, it's quite similar to the departures and the arrivals. It's simply a more efficient way of getting planes in, although they aren't used that often, so you shouldn't need to worry about these too much, but they're worth knowing. So again, runway information, approach procedure, frequency information, you have MSA again, so your minimum safe altitude, and then you have information here on the glide path, the inbound course, the altitudes at these various fixes, and then depending on the required navigation performance here, you have different decision altitudes, which is just, at this altitude you need to decide if you're landing or if you're going around, if you don't have the runway in sight. So not gonna get too in depth with the RNAV because it's fairly not very often used, but it's worth knowing and studying and being able to do in a pinch if you need to. So in fact, they even show here on these charts, they show the types of approach lights that you have. You can see that up here, the approach light situation. Anyway, that kind of wraps up this video. I know it was kind of helter-skelter and I was all over the place at certain times. It wasn't totally organized, but I tried to explain what I could of the charts. If you don't know, or if you have questions or you're not sure what I said in a certain situation, which is totally understandable, I wasn't terribly clear, by all means ask questions. This video felt kind of off, if I'm being honest, but hopefully it will help somebody out there who might be unsure about deciphering charts. If not, I'm sorry. But yeah, if you have any questions at all, you're welcome to ask. I hope it was helpful, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.